right, thank you all for coming. We're going to go ahead and get started with our first panel of the evening, which is on the topic of modularity. And to spice this up a little bit, we have decided to play a little game with our panelists. We're going to have each of the panelists select 5 words that you have all put into this bucket as you walked into the room. These words could be anything ranging from optimistic to lipstick, so they might be very random. And our panelists have to try to insert as many of the 5 words as they can into their conversation this evening. The panelist who inserts all 5 words the most successfully will receive a little prize at the end of the evening. So with that, I will pass this around. Just take the bucket, yeah. And then pick 5 and pass it. All right, and on behalf of Espresso and Cartesi, thank you again for coming back to the future. And we'll give our panelists a moment to pick their words, and we'll give the rest of you a moment to migrate to the back room if you would like to keep the talking going. And then we will get started. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, welcome to the modularity panel. What's next? I think for the agenda today, going to try to talk about where we're headed as a community in the modular space and what each of these guys think is going to push the idea forward further. I think best to start with just some brief intros, start with Kyle and work our way down, and then once Ben is all wrapped up, we'll jump right in.
Awesome. Hey, my name is Kyle. I lead the business team for Avail. Avail's working on a few different things, a data availability layer, a proof aggregation mechanism for interop, and then the ability to stake native tokens like Bitcoin and ETH to increase economic security to the base layer. And before this, I worked on the graph. I led the business team for ETHDenver, the founding team behind the graph. Before that, Wall Street, and before that, military.
Hello, I'm Felipe. I work at Cartesi. We are an app chain and modular execution environment, and we also work with fraud proofs. So our thesis is that the future is going to be full of app chains, and that the Linux runtime, which is what we do as an execution layer, is going to be the best place for apps to live.
Hello everyone, this is Vince from zkLink. We're building aggregation layer for blockchains and rollups. We have launched zkLink Nova, a layer 3, an aggregator layer 3 for Ethereum layer 2s. And also we have a scaling engine, a zk scaling engine for order book DEX, similar to StockX, what DYDX basically was using. We have powered a few order book DEXs like Apex Pro. They launched a new product called Apex Omni, meaning it's with liquidity from Omni chains with access to different chains and assets. And we are also adopting the modular approach, our layer 3, also decouple the framework of Rollup, and we look forward to work with more modular solution providers like Avail, like Espresso. I was just asking, when is the solution already live?
Cool. Was anyone at the Pizza DAO event in New York City? I heard it was rad. Okay, I just wanted to get this one out of the way, but that has nothing to do with anything else I'm going to say. But yeah, so I'm Ben. I'm from Espresso. Welcome to our event. And we're building a coordination mechanism for layer 2 rollups to be able to interoperate with each other better, achieve faster finality, sequencer decentralization, and we also run a sequencer marketplace where rollups can basically sell their sequencer rights on an open market to facilitate better efficiency, higher revenue, etc.
Awesome. Thank you guys for being here and welcome in. I think to kind of lay the land for all the audience and for us here, would like to kind of understand from your perspective how you define modularity in terms of scaling blockchains, and why you guys think that the Ethereum rollup-centric roadmap and that this kind of larger community has rallied behind this idea of scaling more block space rather than scaling the L1, and even whether or not you agree with that idea or not.
So I guess modularity is identifying the Lego pieces of a blockchain or a decentralized application and defining how to optimize each of the functions that are needed for a decentralized application, right? So you have different layers. Usually you talk about settlement, consensus, data availability, execution layers, and all of them together, they form the mothership. But you can also have a modularity inside a single blockchain project, such as Ethereum, that does, like, say, proposer and builder separation. So it's this idea of having different people optimizing different pieces of the stack and thinking about the role of that piece of the stack very specifically. So I'm very excited about modularity. I think it's a great way to look at tech, and I think it's a needed idea for us to actually be able to scale correctly what we're trying to do.
So modular blockchains is a concept relative to monolithic blockchains, right? So it is means for scalabilities, and by decoupling the components, by breaking the trilemma of a blockchain design. So it considers the sequencing layer, data availability, and the execution environment, and decoupling all those components. So we have like a modular DA solution provider like Avail, and also sequencing providers like Espresso, and also execution environments providers like Cartesi. And then now there are a lot more like layer 1 blockchains and layer 2 rollups using these solutions and to becoming modular blockchains. And I think it's a lot easier to scale with modular approach. Of course, there's also trade-offs. It becomes more fragmented, and also the whole system will become more and more fragmented. And also modular blockchains, relatively speaking, compared with monolithic layer 1 blockchains, also has a problem is making additional security assumptions. It's less integrated, and also, of course, it's hard to imagine that Bitcoin becomes a modular blockchain, for example, because you will break the security characteristic because it's been simple and degraded as a layer 1. And I think layer 1, modular blockchains for the Ethereum ecosystem has already become a reality. And then most of the new layer 2s coming are using modular solutions, at some level. So the question is not whether we're going to use modular approaches, how the modular blockchains will become integrated again, so that the problem of fragmentation will be solved.
I'll tell you what modular blockchains are not, and that is market making. And what I will tell you why I believe in them is because it's already happened before. Web 2 scaled through tens of thousands and still operates today with tens of thousands of microservices all around the world, operated by different people. But we are at the point where we're just building that infrastructure, and we have to build it behind the scenes and actually make it work for the end user, which right now, it's a pain in the ass. So I do think it's a big part of the future to increase the block space, just increase the size of the massive Excel doc of the things you can put in to make it faster and less expensive for people. It's just the kind of natural way of things. And it's cool to see Web3 at least take something from Web 2 and just make it better and more resilient, and more transparent.
Yeah, I tend to think of modularity as more of a design principle, right? That even within the design of a layer 1 protocol as well, it's good to keep sort of the components modular. With respect to sort of this modular thesis of will there be many different chains, so to say, that provide different services or platforms that provide data availability, and then separately something like sequencing, and separately something like a settlement layer, etc. I think it's hard to predict how many we really need, and there are security trade-offs of having many different platforms that each have their own distinct security assumption behind it, that really complicate the picture for the end user. Right. On the other hand, I think modularity takes advantage of specialization, sort of how like Belgians are good at making chocolate. So
That's pretty good.
Teams that can specialize in designing a data availability layer can go ahead and build that. Teams that specialize in designing something that is really good at running a marketplace for block builders can go build that. Teams that can specialize in building the best settlement layer can go build that, and rollups, etc.
Yeah, so I think that we're seeing that specialization play out, as well as each of the points which you guys made about scale and about this creation of block space that is kind of abundant and also customizable by nature. But I think that we're also starting to run into the situations of let's look at this from a lens of where we are now and kind of really be real as to what's needed to go forward. And so I'm curious, from a more perhaps a more kind of optimal view of where we're going, what kind of trade-offs do you guys think that the modular space has made, and kind of what are some of the obstacles that we are preparing to face as an ecosystem?
Two that I see are, the clearest one is fragmented UX and liquidity and these silos of access points. And so what people are working on with that is interop solutions that are becoming modular so people can specialize in that. And then it's, what was I going to say? I'll stick with there so I don't take anyone else's.
So modular, as Ben was saying, has a few trade-offs, mainly in the mental models and the security assumptions. So when we develop our own protocol, you really take care of the trust assumptions and the security assumptions to make sure that what you're building is safe, right? And that's the case with zk rollups, optimistic rollups, and so on. Once you start to import many different modules that each has their own security assumptions, then the combination of security assumptions can be quite tricky. So that's something to think about. Another challenge is that now you have different projects taking care of different things, and these projects, they communicate with different tools, they build different applications. So you have to, in a way, not only have interoperability between the protocols, but also some sort of cooperation between the teams to actually make something great. Because if you think about it, the application actually needs all pieces of the stack to actually be useful, right? So an application needs to use Cartesi, Espresso, Avail, and so on. Otherwise, you'll end up with paper planes, which is what we don't want.
I think they already touched upon the most important trade-off of modular blockchains, which is the security. Monolithic blockchains, generally, I think it is at this point has better security, less security assumptions than modular blockchains. As you have more components, especially with external components integrations, you make some sort of security assumptions somewhere. And also another trade-off, I think it is interoperability. There are two perspectives of interoperability. One interoperability is interoperability within a blockchain ecosystem. A monolithic blockchain has atomic interoperability of all these transactions on a code level, so you can call contract, you can call liquidity, and you can compose those. The composability of these atomic interoperability is very important for DeFi ecosystem, for example. But for modular blockchains, because it serves purpose of different applications, so it becomes more application specific. So it is enhanced for different purposes. So we will see a lot application chains, application specific chains being modular, and the interoperability among these chains is a problem yet to be solved. Number two is that you do not have that sort of composability across these modular chains, not yet. So we are still finding ways to solve this problem. This is a $1 billion problem. If anyone solves this is going to be a huge winner.
So what's more important than apps being sovereign or apps being able to be interoperable with other apps and other ecosystems?
It's hard to say which one is more important. I think they both have their own they both have their own use case. It's not like for everyone, one for everything. But you have Solana that's high performance is still very successful, right? At the same time, we will have like Ethereum layer 2s, layer 3s, app rollups, and other app chains as well. For certain high performance applications, I do not believe that they will like the Solana will reach the limit very soon. So they would like to be sovereign. They want to run their own sovereign app chain, and then it requires a modular approach to provide the highly scalable components and customizable, flexible components to be able to serve their purposes, to meet their diverse demands.
Yeah.
Can I just comment on your question? So I guess interoperability is, of course, important, but the need of interoperability diminishes once you start to have more and more complex applications. So if you have a complex application that can cover an entire vertical, say an exchange that has not only trading but also futures, options, lending, and so on, then you actually don't need to be that much interoperable with other things. You need financial interoperability, but you don't need use case interoperability anymore. So
I would actually a little bit disagree, because the more complex and specific they become, the more they're going to need to communicate with each other. Let's say we get away from DeFi and liquidity and aspects, but let's say you buy something on Amazon, you're using your phone, it communicates with Amazon, then it goes through a credit card app, and that needs to communicate, and that is interoperability. It's cross-chain messaging. So I do think, I do agree with you in some part, but I do think as they get more complex, the higher the need for like true cross-chain messaging, and whether it's asynchronous or synchronous, what you're working on, I think they're both extremely important.
So would you view roll-ups as part of sort of this modularity theme? Because
Yeah.
I think that it's not obvious to everyone that that's the case. That would you call different applications part of the modular thesis, right? Like you have different applications on Ethereum and they all specialize in different things, but we don't really view that as part of the sort of modularity. So if we're talking about the trade-offs of an application becoming its own roll-up, I don't know that really has much to do with modularity, unless it's about like designing your own VM, right? That's different from the EVM. But the way that I view it is when applications become a roll-up, it's more about just having price congestion independence from other applications. And then there's this fundamental trade-off between sort of taking ownership of your own transaction processing, which has obvious benefits for scalability and price congestion independence and other things like that. And the trade-off is that you compromise on it, the ability to compose with other applications. But with save the design of new rollups that are exploring other types of virtual machines, right? Like Cartesi, right? Like Eclipse, like others. I sort of don't necessarily view rollups as sort of part of this modularity themes per se, and so in my view, the trade-off of modularity is mainly that it allows for teams. I mean, in my view, sort of modularity is the fact that we now have systems that specialize in DA, for example, right? And users are getting comfortable with the idea of using, Celestio or Avail or others instead of using Ethereum DA, because it's going to take a really long time to get Ethereum DA to be as performant. Right? So from one perspective, the benefit is, wow, we can allow teams to specialize and move really quickly and build something else that achieves the same thing Ethereum is eventually going to try to achieve, but on a much faster timescale. Whereas the trade-off is actually that this presto progress is also maybe counter one of the important principles of Web3, which is that we move really carefully and slowly and prioritize security. Right? So the fact that teams are now willing to forgo waiting for danksharding and use other alternative DAs that don't necessarily have the same economic security as Ethereum is perhaps a trade-off.
Yeah, Ben, and I always want to bring it back to you. We have this mushroom cloud of new rollups, Ben, and we're seeing new app chains launch, and a lot of these are only being connected by potentially one interoperability provider, which I kind of find to be a little bit preposterous. How is your vision of post-shared sequencing era going to look for the modular future for app chains, for rollups? Like, why do we need shared sequencing? And a lot of us have talked about the trade-offs here of interoperability. Why is this going to solve that?
Yeah. So I would say that the primary reason, and I keep getting spam calls on my phone. Sorry. The primary reason for shared sequencing to exist in this world that we're describing of app chains and specifically that we have applications that as you guys were discussing, need to interoperate, is that if you want to have very fast synchronous communication between applications, then fundamentally you need some kind of coordinated block building, right? I'm really excited about designs that have come up recently, like Polygon ZAG layer, etc., that try to reduce as much as possible any kind of trust you'd be putting in such a coordinated block builder. But fundamentally, you need to have some kind of coordination, and that's the main point. And that's why I view sort of shared sequencing as a necessity. It's not something that becomes a permanent fixture of a chain. It's not like two chains need to permanently agree to share the same sequencer. It's more that ad hoc chains will inevitably need to be, to have their transactions sort of constructed in a coordinated way by a common party, and you need some kind of market mechanism or other kind of mechanism for efficiently, determining who's going to do that. So I think that it sort of comes down to the question of how important synchronous composability is versus asynchronous. So this was a big topic of discussion on our sequencing day a few days ago. It's been a big discussion in the community. And I sort of leave it as an open challenge for people to think. I view synchronous composability as the main thing that distinguishes Web3 from Web 2. I mean, in Web 2, we have many applications that interoperate asynchronously and communicate asynchronously. And so we have that already. I mean, the main difference between Web3 and Web 2, in my mind, is the ability of applications to live on the same global computer that's trusted by everyone and synchronously interoperate. And so the extent to which that is actually key and important, and the applications that enable that, will determine how things like shared sequencing will actually shape the future of Ethereum and modular blockchains.
In my mind, what differentiates Web3 from Web 2 is decentralization, censorship resistance, and so on. I think I do believe interoperability is important for many use cases, and I think shared sequencers are great for, say, amortizing costs as well, between app chains, for instance. But I don't think we can scale. So let me say this: like the internet can't run on a single server, right? So I think this idea that we'll have all Web3 applications running on the same chain under a global consensus machine, I think that's not a good way to actually bring these great things that Web3 gives us to life, right? So there's no reason why a bondage application needs to be interoperable with a private DeFi. It makes no sense, right? You don't need that. Maybe you do need financial interoperability so you can move your money around. But yeah.
I think for the second half of this year, we'll see kind of the rise of the novel execution layer. I think for first half was of this year was Celestia launch, Avail's coming very soon, other DA providers are coming online. Okay, we don't need to use Ethereum for DA. Okay, that's a big 0 to 1. I think that the next 0 to 1 here for the modular space is basically scaling outside of EVM. We only have a couple minutes left, but how are you guys looking at the evolution of the execution layer in terms of what benefits does this bring to users and developers, and then what challenges are you also foreseeing?
Sorry, could you just repeat the last part of your question?
Yeah, what are the benefits for users and developers, and then also what challenges are you seeing?
The benefits from execution
novel
layers.
execution layers.
Novel execution layers. Yeah. Right. Well, it's serendipitous that this was your last question. So I think that the main thing that's going to come from novel execution layers is opening sort of new applications. I mean, when we talk about bottlenecks, right? There's the EVM itself wasn't necessarily a bottleneck because the Ethereum state machine was so slow to begin with. But once you move from, what rollups have unlocked is sort of removing the sort of Ethereum state machine, the Ethereum consensus itself, as a bottleneck, and so now now other things become the bottleneck, right? And one of those is the actual just speed at which you can execute even on a single machine, and the EVM is extremely slow for that relative to other possibilities. So experimenting with just really fast execution environments that can now run on rollups is going to unlock hopefully new applications, and that's going to be beneficial for both developers to find new applications and ultimately end users. But I would say there's other things besides performance, right? There's also things like safety. You can have new VMs that are designed very well to, have formal analysis and be very difficult to write bugs into. I mean, bugs and smart contracts is a huge issue with the EVM and Solidity. I mean, of course, this can be taken care of at a higher level of abstraction, and things can be compiled down to the EVM. But I think writing new VMs in which it's that are really good for high sensitivity applications and security is another direction as well. I don't know. I could go on and on. I would persevere, but I think I'm going to stop here.
Yeah, the thesis that L2s are going to be EVMs is not a very digestive thesis to me. It's a waste to look at L2s and app chains with all the computational scalability that you have and not imagine that you can have better VMs that are more like real computers and that can give you access to tooling of Web 2 and more expressive coding environments and so on. So I think it's a waste to keep insisting on EVM when in this world of L2s and L3s and so on, you can actually explore different execution environments, different data availability models, and so on.
I also think, to Cartesi's credit, it's also about developer optionality. And with a few 100,000 Web3 developers around the world right now, there's a few million Rust developers. There's 10 plus million C++ developers. We need more languages that are more familiar, simpler, that people are able to tap into the Web3 development pool. And so folks, things like Linux that is going to be important as well. The performance and safety will come, and that's why I love the pushing forward of all this and pushing the envelope. But I also think it's just developer optionality, because one language probably won't become the de facto, probably won't become Solidity, and with people doing that with different languages, I think that will increase the developer pool, even if it's just a red pill one, and then they learn Solidity from there, going to other things.
We've had a little bit of experience with dealing with different execution layers, the execution environments. We developed the layer 3 based on zk stack, and also we wrote a little bit of like Cairo contracts and also we open sourced the first zk snark verified contract on Solana VM. And also we are we're collaborating with Risk Zero for their zk VM solution. It's interesting to see that there was a few teams building fully EVM compatible zk EVM solutions, and others are trying to build more performance, high performance zk VMs. I think it is definitely necessary. It's very important to have these efforts for future fully zk snarked or starked blockchain. Even Ethereum layer 1 itself could be fully zk snarked as per the roadmap, right? And as for these new zk VMs and other types of VMs, there's also some Solana VM builder to build a layer 2s on Ethereum. Movement Labs, I think it is trying to move VM to Ethereum as a layer 2. Well, it's audacious, and and I think it is definitely good things it's good to have those many options to see which plays out more as a trade-off and as a technical solution for different purpose of applications. And at the same time, technology is not the only thing that we care about, especially application builders maybe care more about ecosystem, care more about the user, the actual liquidity they tap to. Yeah, this is very important as well. But technology is also evolving very quickly. But we're definitely open, as we are aggregator solution. We are fully open to work with any of these technology and tech stacks, and trying to help onboard more developers to each of these tech stacks by simplifying and abstracting some of these complexities of these tech stacks.
Awesome, Vince. And thank you all for coming up today. Let's give them a warm round of applause for the awesome panel, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
So just before I let you all go, I want to hear what words you all made it through. Ben,
I used all my words.
you used all of them.
I used all of them.
Read them out real quick.
Presto, chocolate, pizza dough,
That one I caught.
perseverance, serendipity.
I just used the one.
Just the one. Which one?
Optimistic.
All right.
I also use them all. The mothership, paper plane, digestive, bondage, that was hard, and private DeFi.
Awesome.
I totally failed. I used one, and it was market making.
That's a layup.
Added 2, mushroom and preposterous.
Mushroom is impressive.
Mushroom is
All right,
tough.
we've got 2 winners from Espresso and Cartesi, of course.
Of course.
All right, thank you all. We'll take a 30-minute break, and we'll be back in 30 minutes. Please enjoy the whole museum. The museum is open. Enjoy the drinks, enjoy the snacks and food, and of course, enjoy the company. See you in a bit. Second and final panel of the night. We appreciate your time and attention. And it'll be the same rules as last time. So for those of you who missed it, each of the panelists is going to pick 5 random words out of this bucket. Just take the bucket and pass it on. Yeah, and then take 5 out and pass it on. It is not a seed phrase. Good guess. But each panelist will have 5 random words, so it could be things like, what did we have last time? Mushroom, perseverance, optimistic, lipstick, whatever. And they'll have to find ways of including that word in their responses. And for those who do, there will be a prize. So we'll get started here in a moment. Again, if you'd like to continue your conversation, please migrate to the back room now. And with that, I will hand it over for a discussion on Bitcoin and modularity and rollups. So off we go. Thank you all again for coming. And over to Robbie.
All right. Welcome everyone for coming, and welcome to all our panelists. A lot of friends and familiar faces up here. Good to see everyone again. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Bitcoin L2s. Is it crazy, a reality, or just vibes? Definitely good vibes all around, and we'll figure out what else is going on here. At first, I was going to try to use all of these in the first sentence, but I just, the variety in these words is ridiculous. Okay, so to start off, why don't we go around the horn for some intros and say hello.
Hi, my name is Dom. I'm from the Bob team, Build on Bitcoin, and that's really all we're about is everybody should build on Bitcoin, and they should ideally do it right now. And yeah, I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah, so my name is Brett. I work for Gelato. Gelato's been in the Ethereum space for a while, providing smart contract automation infrastructure for developers. And for the last year, we've been helping teams launch rollups on Arbitrum and Optimism, and we're excited to help teams build on Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I'm Carsten from Cartesi, and we are building an alternative VM that can run Linux. And one of the benefits of doing Linux is you can have a buttery, smooth development experience when you actually do your smart contracts. And I've also been playing around quite a lot with BitVM and those kind of like things in the Bitcoin space.
Hey everyone, my name is Verity and I look after ecosystem/partnerships at Espresso. We're stoked to have you with us tonight. I hope that you're enjoying the good vibes and great drinks. Really stoked to be partnering with so many of these projects, especially with Gelato because I love ice cream and Cartesi brings good vibes.
Hey everyone, I'm Orkun. I'm one of the founders of Citrea, and we are building Bitcoin's first zk rollup. We made our work public around 6 months ago, and we recently launched our first public devnet. So yes.
Awesome. All right. So everyone's familiar with Bitcoin, but maybe not so much with recent developments of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is undergoing some changes and evolutions now. But a lot of Bitcoiners are kind of still stuck in their ways. They mostly just want to
pet rock, a store of value that doesn't really do anything. But we have some more people coming into the ecosystem that want Bitcoin to be more expressive, want to add covenants. And so first question is, how expressive should Bitcoin be? Should it be just a pet rock that doesn't do anything? Or should we make it expressive, and how expressive?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something that we will all try to figure out along the way. So I think right now, as we all know, Bitcoin is like the gold chain. It only does that. You use it as store of value. We want it to do more things, but I think the safest way to get there is by building L2s, but also, that's a recent development. We've seen ordinals, but still, if you try to build anything with ordinals, it's super hard with Bitcoin script. So EVM has been probably the one thing that most people are supporting because we have such great tooling there. And there's been so many L2s popping up that focus on Bitcoin, all with their own problems, because if you look at the risks of L2s right now on Bitcoin, while they might look very green on the outside, like a melon, they are deeply red inside. And that's why we started building like a hybrid L2. So secured by Ethereum, very pragmatic approach, and add Bitcoin security later on. But we do think expressivity is extremely important. And our idea is bring all the great tooling that we have on the EVM and bring that to Bitcoin land.
I can take that. Yeah, so I think we all know the Bitcoin zeitgeist is pretty conservative. I do think that's a good thing, and we've pushed a lot of innovation and crazy things on the periphery, and a lot of things have been either thrown out or have done wildly, or been very successful. But I think a good starting point would be what's the, minimum necessary expressiveness that we need at the base layer, and separate that from the L2 discussion. And I think the minimum necessary expressiveness would be some ability to prove verification or verify proofs that have been submitted to the base layer from something like build on Bitcoin, and we can kind of push off that expressiveness debate away from the L1 and let the market kind of figure out what it wants. And it looks like the market wants some type of EVM compatibility. So I think maximum expressiveness on the L2 layer is what's going to happen. And hopefully we get those opcodes that make it easy for someone to submit a proof and for it to be verified on the base layer. That's the minimum in my book.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that has been fantastic about the most recent Bitcoin development is that with things like BitVM, there's of course a little bit of discussion if this is kind of like completely permissionless and it works and so on, but that's a different topic. But because it's been so permissionless, there's been a huge development community where everybody can be a busy beaver and actually develop on Bitcoin. And that basically has shown that people can actually come in and actually try out new things on Bitcoin, which has not really been possible before.
Yeah, I really echo Carsten's point there. I think that there are always going to be multiple schools of thought in any community, just like everyone likes different types of Belgian beer. There are some who are going to be more interested in keeping Bitcoin as this very pure kind of play that it is today, especially the OGs that have been there since the beginning. But in reality, you're always going to get a degree of innovation, whether you want it there or not. And there are people who are speculating and interested in the Bitcoin L2 ecosystem and want to be there. And there are others who are making a bet on the tech becoming more and more compelling, especially over the next couple of years, that I think even if you have very strong views on it, it's kind of going to happen anyway. Inscriptions really popped off in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and suddenly it was jamming up every other L2 and the Ethereum ecosystem at the same time. So someone's going to come and innovate in that way.
Yeah, I think from just price perspective, Bitcoin is only the half of the market, and from activity perspective, it is much less. So Bitcoin is doing payments better, Bitcoin is making money better, but if you want to compete with all of them on the Bitcoin, we should be much more expressive, but we don't want to make this load burden of L1 nodes or miners, so we don't want to change Bitcoin a lot and introduce weird scripts. That's why I think we need to also push all these expressiveness to the L2, but we should make it in proper way. So we should some kind of introduce the zk verifier opcode on Bitcoin L1 so that we can get all the security of the L1 to the L2s without harming Bitcoin L1. So there are different proof systems like Gross16, Plonk, and Kimchi. So we should implement either one of those or like kind of have this Stark or pairing-based opcodes to make these L1 chains sufficient for L2's inherit full security of Bitcoin.
Nice. I heard some of our panelists allude to OP Armadillo. OP Cat. But we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Okay, so next topic here is if we introduce really any type of expressiveness into Bitcoin, we may introduce MEV. And MEV is this very slippery topic, almost like noodles are very slippery. And so I also like what you did with throwing the paper on the floor. I'm gonna copycat that. And so thinking about MEV and how it relates to Bitcoin, I'm curious at a high level, do you guys think MEV is a feature or a bug? And if it is implemented into Bitcoin, how are we able to kind of like get the best out of MEV and minimize the drawbacks of MEV?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in most places or in most cases, MEV is more of a bug really than a feature. And I think the way Ethereum goes about it is to try to democratize MEV so that it's accessible to the average user. But ideally, you don't want to have your transactions sandwiched. That makes for very poor UX. It's just because the way that we build most of these technologies, it's in a way out of necessity poorly designed. With public mempools, there's zero privacy. And we should really strive to build for a world where there's very, very little MEV and where there's privacy in these systems. There's a very funny thing about centralized L2s because you can reduce MEV actually a lot because you have a centralized sequencer, which most people, I guess, don't know. But that's one thing that you can do. And what I personally actually find very interesting, if you run a small set of sequencers that are externally verified, then you could reduce a lot of the MEV. And I think we should strive to find more of these solutions that benefit the users.
So one I want to push back a little bit is, and not that you're wrong initially, but not you, but just that Bitcoin has had MEV in, I'd say, a primitive ways, things like replace by fee, and then more, the mining pools kind of taking transactions on the side and, giving preference to certain transactions, and then more recently with ordinals front-running those auctions. But I think it's a bug it's a consequence of a feature, which is expressiveness, right? And economic success, right? And I also don't think it's something that necessitates not adding expressiveness just because MEV exists. The Ethereum community has been very proactive in trying to mitigate it. They haven't gotten rid of it. But actually, I think this month, Ethereum or the community just made a new Ethereum improvement proposal enshrining something they call PBS, which is proposer builder separation. And I don't know if that'll be exactly applicable to Bitcoin because Bitcoin and Ethereum are very different. You have the UTXO proof of work, and then you have account and proof of stake. But there might be something that can be abstracted from some of the solutions that the Ethereum community developed that can be applied to, the devil's in the details there, and how it can be applied to, any problems that come on Bitcoin through MEV. But yeah, I don't think it's like a reason not to have expressiveness. It's a good bug to have, so to speak.
So I'm not going to say if MEV is good or bad for Bitcoin or something like that, but if the Bitcoin people want to go on questing together with us to build an awesome starship that is expressive and can get these kind of things, you need to kind of come along with the journey and learn how to deal with radiation.
I'm just gonna say, putting in these like random words is making it very fun, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the panel's creativity. Okay, so when it comes to MEV, I think the reality is I lean towards it being more of a feature, especially in markets that are more financialized. You see arbitrage in TradFi. Obviously, we've talked extensively about MEV and Ethereum. What we do want to avoid is how you might think about like good versus bad MEV. So it can be very efficient to have back running after a transaction for price correction. But what we want to avoid is things like sandwiching attacks, or in my case, Peter sandwich attacks, where basically a user is placing a trade and they're getting front run and end up paying more before they kind of get back run, put very simply. And that's the user paying a price to use apps and roll-ups on chain. And that is not great. It's a not great outcome because people are paying for something that they didn't get the value out of. So I lean towards saying roll-ups should have a lot of flexibility in how they choose to manage their MEV. But what I've seen working at Espresso and talking to so many different teams is that everyone wants to take a pretty different approach. But I would lean towards saying that Bitcoin MEV is probably going to be similar to Ethereum if we're going to add like smart contract capabilities or more expressiveness over time. But you know, it's crypto, so we put a finger in the air and make a prediction and see where we land a year from now.
I think we also have MEV on Bitcoin today with ordinals and BRC20s. There's no AMMs on Bitcoin, but with BRC20s you can easily snipe some of the buy orders or sell orders. So that's also part of the MEV, I believe. But especially with rollups, like the sequencers leave the bigger part of the cheese to the L1 miners, but they keep the smaller part, which is the MEV revenue, or let's say priority revenue you call. And the rollups are incentivized to keep that revenue inside of them. So all the rollup roadmaps today, like decentralizing the sequencer or sharing the sequencer, they don't leak MEV to the L1. That's the main priority, let's say, feature of rollups. So I don't think rollup will introduce MEV on Bitcoin, but based rollups can. But I don't think no one will build a Bitcoin-based rollup with 10 minutes block time. So that's not going to happen. With expressivity, as long as you cannot build an AMM or something like that, there won't be an MEV. But you can keep L1 very simple. Like I said, just implement some zk verify opcodes, and you will be fine on the L2s, and you don't introduce any MEV on the L1 as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times we do talk about the Bitcoin layer 1 as this very secure fortress that can't really be tampered with. But I recently heard a podcast about quantum entanglement. And so that brings me to my next question. Relative to the Bitcoin L1, what does adding expressiveness have? Does that have any effect on the quantum resistance of Bitcoin? I know that's kind of a sideways question, but I'm curious if there's been any more research on the quantum resistance of Bitcoin. It's the only way I could include entanglement into my question.
Well, okay, so this is a very interesting question. Quantum resistance, I think, sometimes when people talk about these quantum resistance, you know, it's like we're just on the verge of finding like these things and it will break all of crypto, when in reality, you know, they promise a race car when they actually just have a skating on the skateboard. So I think we're very far away from quantum computing and really needing to worry about it. That being said, I think it's really easy to kind of adopt, or well, relatively simple to adopt new quantum resistance standards for Bitcoin. And then on the expressiveness layer, I think it really doesn't matter much. You have enough quantum resistance crypto out there already. If you make an evolvable layer of expressiveness on top of Bitcoin, be that through zk-based L2s, optimistic L2s, like you will be withstand these kind of things. It's not that, you know, tomorrow we wake up and suddenly it's there. While I wish oftentimes technology would evolve that fast, but it really doesn't.
I don't know if I have a follow-up to that on quantum entanglement or quantum computing. It's not something I spend a lot of time thinking about, but I will say, and I don't know if this is right, but if you do have quantum computing and it breaks some of the cryptographic primitives we have, it also implies that you could use the quantum computing to create new cryptographic primitives, right? So there's always an arms race going on in crypto between the I guess the code makers and code breakers. So it's not something that I spend a lot of time worrying about.
This is a topic that I'm going to table for 2025, but if you want to talk to one of our computer scientists about it, they are here. I'll introduce you later.
Yeah, I've seen some proposals on like hash-based signatures and stuff for quantum resistance, but I don't think that's no one's priority right now.
You guys are absolute legends for even attempting to answer that question. You all belong on Mount Olympus.
Thank you.
Is that the end of our panel, or we just break? Oh, okay.
Just
all right.
great jokes.
No, I love it. Just well deserved too. Okay, so I want to talk. Okay, so thinking about the Bitcoin L2s that are out there now. We have Bob, we have Citrea. There are solutions out there. I'm curious as to the sorts of demand that we see in the market for these solutions. And so I have a quick statistic here. Ethereum L2s like Arbitrum and Optimism went to mainnet about 3 years ago. And right now, 44% of Ethereum value, ETH value, lives on L2s. And so I'm curious, we have Bitcoin L2 starting to go to mainnet now and soon. And so thinking 3 years ahead into the future, how much of the Bitcoin supply do you guys think is going to end up living on L2s? Do you think it'll be 44% like we see in Ethereum 3 years after mainnet? Or do you think it'll be more or less?
Yeah, it's always hard to predict the future. I think it will be probably around the same, considering two things. First of all, we learned a lot from L2s on Ethereum. I think right now, we're going to be stage 1 L2 on Ethereum in 2 days from now when we add fraud proofs. So technology just got a lot further. But the second factor that I think will hinder a bit of the adoption is that one of the features of Bitcoin is that it is evolving very slowly, and a lot of people use it as an extremely risk-averse, which is funny considering it's still crypto, as a risk-averse asset. The other thing, or that's the key thing that we are actually working on, Bob, our core thing isn't just being an L2. Our mission is to make it extremely easy to onboard people from Bitcoin to apps that are on Bob. And we think that's one of the key blockers right now. If any of you, ever tried to use any DeFi app and you started from the Bitcoin chain, and then you need to use some random bridge, you have no idea if that's going to work out well to Ethereum, and then you bridge from Ethereum to an L2, pay another $50 of fees, and then you go to an app, and now you're on 3-4 different websites and use 2 different bridges, and that's horrible. So what we want is any app should have a direct bridge from Bitcoin into their app, and that's what we want to facilitate through Bob.
Yeah, so I think we can split this question up into 2 different segments. What percentage of the, Bitcoin supply will go into it, and then also what's the notional value? So my instinct would be the percentage would be less than 44%, right? But the notional value might actually be larger just because Bitcoin's larger. But I also think there's a misconception based on, how loud people are on different social platforms about the risk-taking appetite of Bitcoiners. There's a lot of people that came later on into Bitcoin that really took the digital gold metaphor seriously. And they kind of get locked into that metaphor when it's really just a useful way of describing it. But there's a lot of Bitcoin capital out there that either funded the Ethereum ICO and has moved on to other things that is, has a pretty big risk appetite. So it definitely won't be zero like some people might believe, but I don't think it'll be, the 44%, but I think it'll be close to this, the same notional value that's now locked up in Ethereum L2s.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to when it comes to Bitcoin layer 2s, I think we'll see kind of like a much slower phase in terms of like what people actually consider safe in Bitcoin, and it will take much longer time to actually get there because everything is experimental at the moment and we don't really know. I think it's also worth noting like how much Bitcoin is sitting on exchanges nowadays because they're like kind of like a little bit like primitive layer 2s without any kind of security. And I don't know how exactly it's going to play out, but I think we'll definitely see a few things blow up and a lot of people kind of losing a bunch of money and kind of some of these things not working. So let's see what kind of people's comfort level is with these things.
My business instinct tells me somewhere between 25 to 30%, so come fact check me in the future. I agree with Dom's point that there's a lot of innovation that we can already take from the L2 ecosystem in Ethereum and other ecosystems. But what I think we're lacking at this point that Ethereum did have was a lot of apps that users were paying to transact on even when the network was quite congested. And I think that we have the early grassroots of that in the Bitcoin ecosystem, but a lot of users who are willing to engage in that tech are still very kind of early adopters or crypto native, and they're usually a smaller group of people that are high intent. And so that's why I would kind of put it at a little bit of a haircut to where we're at with Ethereum today. Yeah, that's my thinking. So, mixed reviews.
I think Bitcoin is quite different than Ethereum, both in terms of the community itself. It is very, very different. So adopting these changes and new proposals is way harder in Bitcoin than Ethereum. And the second thing is BTC asset distribution is also very weird. There are some locked coins in Satoshi's wallet. There are some empty Gox hacked coins. There's big institutions. There's ETFs. So the asset distribution is also very different. But I think as a curve, I don't think it will be it will accelerate as fast as Ethereum. It will start very, very slow. But once it gets accelerated, it will accelerate even more. So it will reach to a point sooner than Ethereum, I believe. But it will be still hard to adopt these changes at first place.
Awesome. And I think we're about to wrap up here, so maybe can't get too much into the details, but my last question is, are each of you for or against OPCat?
It's a good question. It's a very political question, I guess, at this point. I'm generally for innovations or for OPCat. I think it's a good idea. It will enable stuff around BitVM, ideally. Also, I still need to use the word paddle, so paddle. And I like innovation, so I like trying it out. So it would be good to do it, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to go a hard yes. And that links back to what I guess my answer was on the first question, which was minimum necessary expressiveness. And OPCat, it opens up the ability for there to be proof submitted and verified on the Bitcoin L1 and unlocks things like Citrea and some of the things that Build on Bitcoin is doing. And I guess you would, and I'm not a Bitcoin core developer, but I would, I guess, there's two dimensions that are relevant in this discussion, which is usefulness and safety. So I think, from a high level, it seems highly useful. And then from a safety perspective, a good proxy of complexity would be how many lines of code does it have, right? It's not perfect, but it seems to have a small surface area. It was something that was originally put in by Satoshi, and it was taken out later because of some safety issues related to another opcode. But those things have been, discussed and fixed. And you've also had a robust developer discussion around it and a lot of consensus around it. Not everyone agrees, but I think it's pretty good that if a lot of developers agree, it should be pretty safe. So I think on those two dimensions that are relevant to me, usefulness and safety, it's pretty good. And I think it's something that'll unlock a lot of activity on L2s.
So in general, I'm quite pro OPCat, but I'm a little worried that it kind of has been co-opted into a culture war at this particular point in time, because if OPCat was there, let's say making a Merkle tree proof verification would be as simple as making bread. compared to now, where literally you almost have to make a nuclear reactor to make something like this work, which is completely insane. So I think for the sake of safety and for the sake of having more understandable, less exploitable systems, it's good to have it.
I'm going to say 4, but it also makes me feel very self-conscious. Like, we don't have any Bitcoin maxis on this panel, but you haven't responded yet, so we'll see. I've been in the industry 7 or 8 years, and I have historically been a Bitcoin holder, so I would love to see that change. I also think that like the OPCAT proposal is going to be a lot of hard work. It's not a sure thing that it's going to get across the line, but they're at least starting the conversation and starting this like degree of engagement around what this could look like. And I'm excited for innovating on Bitcoin, even if it takes a while to get there.
Yeah, I'm personally for OPCAT, but I think the community become weird after like all taproot activation and the CTV stuff. But I'm feeling like we are starting to lose majority on support OPCAT with like other social changing stuff, unless some of the parties or like some social actors take some initiative for OPCAT. I think it won't be happening, but I'm personally supporting it.
5 for 5. OPCAT looking good. All right, give it up for our panelists.
All right, OPCAT passes. How many of you used all 5 words?
I only had 4.
All right.
We got rugged.
Did you use 4 and 2? All right, we'll count it. Any of you use all 5? Oh, hell yeah.
I think he's...
All right, Avery, I hope we've prepared enough gift bags. All right, well, congratulations. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to all of our panelists, both this one and the Modularity panel. Enjoy the evening, enjoy the museum. I encourage everyone to walk around, make the most of it, make the most of the drinks, the food. We have this venue until midnight? Yes, midnight. So stick around, tell your friends to join us, and thank you again.